And now it is my pleasure to introduce tenor saxophonist Sophie Faught. She is an improviser, composer, bandleader, and teacher. Sophie speaks the jazz language with creativity, wit, passion, depth, and soul. Sophie's music is mindful of tradition without being held captive by it. Each Wednesday, she and her trio play at the Chatterbox on Mass Ave from 8 to 11 p.m. They recently released an album of original compositions entitled 3 Muses and is available on Sophie's website. Please join me in welcoming Sophie Faught and her bandmate Nick Tucker to the stage.
Everybody, Nick Tucker. Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. Where's the clicker? Over here. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, you guys were supposed to be reading this quote while we were playing, but no big deal. Just read it now. Okay. While you do that, I will accustom myself to being up here in front of all of you lovely people. Okay. So, my name is Sophie, and first and foremost, I am a human being. I wouldn't always have introduced myself that way. I probably, for a long time, would have said, my name is Sophie, and I'm a jazz musician. But I've come to realize that the terminology is really important, And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I've decided to change my terms there. All right, so I'm here to talk to you about revolution. And I think that before we begin our discussion, we ought to define our terms. That's really important. So sort of like the modern definition of revolution, there's this idea that you have a radical new concept, and this is so life-changing and world-altering that it overthrows a dominant paradigm. But the original use of the word was quite different. Back in the day, it was used by astrologers and astronomers specifically to describe the orbit of a planet, so a known path that could be measured, and you could count on that planet to come back around, unless, of course, the gods intervened. And that's how it kind of got transposed over to political theory. But what I want to do today is sort of focus on that older meaning of revolution. And the reason why is because I think most of us as creative people have long ago discovered that there's no such thing as a new idea. There's literally nothing new under the sun. And so to me, revolution is really about cycles of knowledge and memory, old ideas becoming new again in a new context. And so to me, revolution is the remembrance of an old idea today. As human beings, I think that we're facing a huge problem today. And the way that I would describe it is a strong dehumanizing force. What do I mean by dehumanizing? Something that is dehumanizing objectifies you. It denies that you have humanity, soul, or meaning, and it turns you into an object. Why would this force be so strong in our society? What is it trying to accomplish? Well, I think that by turning us humans into objects, we can be counted. We can be fed into equations. We can be fed into algorithms. And we can be essentialized. And this is an attempt to assume that we can understand how humans behave and to see humans as behaving predictably. I also think that a huge part of this dehumanizing project is trying to market things to people. Because if you tell them that they're just objects and they don't really have souls or meaning, then it's a lot easier to sell them something that perhaps could be a surrogate soul or meaning. So basically, how do you feel when you're dehumanized? You feel anonymous. You feel like your identity, your name, your history are not important. You feel like you've been turned into a cog in a machine or a productive member of society. And then when you factor in this whole theme of planned obsolescence, which is really a big part of this project too, you see that you yourself are expendable and that all of these counterfeit souls that you're buying will soon break and you'll have to buy another one. And basically, it kind of sucks to be a part of this whole process. I know I feel that way. So what is the solution? I think that the solution is to reclaim craftsmanship. So craftsmanship, what's that? Well, to me, that is the uniquely human ability to make with our hands, with our minds. We actually have an opportunity to create something that has never existed before. And when we do that, even though, yes, we're manipulating physical reality, we're doing more than just physical things. It's a spiritual thing because we're giving a little piece of ourselves and our personalities as we're doing that. We're creating meaning. So today I want to tell you guys the story of my own personal revolution. I want to share with you the cycle of my memory, how I learned about this idea of craftsmanship, how I forgot it, and how I relearned it. I think that every story is different. I'm going to tell you mine today, but I also want to ask you, what is yours? Okay, so in the beginning, when I was really young, I spent a lot of time in a creative space because my dad is an artist. And he stayed home with us kids and took care of us. And he worked in the studio all day long. And so while he was working on these giant canvases that filled up the whole wall, we were sort of in the corner scribbling on pieces of paper and making paper hats and finger puppets and stuff like that. And so I got the opportunity to observe my dad as not just an artist, a person who created every day, but also a person who was very thoughtful and introspective about the work that he was doing. He was constantly evaluating the intention behind his work, the meaning that people might find in it, and I think having that example early on really showed me that being an artist is more than just manipulating physical reality. It's also about using your mind and almost living sort of a philosopher's life. So, so that was pretty cool growing up, seeing him do his thing. And eventually, I discovered my own medium, which was music. And I took to it pretty early. I think that I got a keyboard for Christmas when I was 4 years old, and I just really never looked back. And I'm sure a lot of you who have engaged deeply with a craft can relate to that feeling when you first figure out, I love this thing. And actually, there's a name for this mindset of that beginning, when you're just learning and becoming part of a craft, and that is beginner mind. I totally stole that term from some Zen Buddhism book or something. But that beginner mind, if you guys can remember back to when you first began to do whatever it is that you love to do you remember what it felt like to be totally open-minded? You knew that you weren't very good at this thing, and so you felt like you could learn lessons from virtually anyone about how to do it better, and you were just hungry for that knowledge. As a beginner, you're willing to take risks, first of all, because you don't know what's hard or easy. Everything seems hard to you. And second of all, you feel like you have nothing to lose, which is actually true all the time, but somehow as a beginner, you're a lot more aware of that. There's really no ego involved. You know you're bad at whatever it is that you're trying to do, and you want to get better, but you don't really have this image that you need to maintain, and you don't really have an ego at all. And also, you just take joy in the process. That's really the foremost thing. The results are relatively unimportant, although you can sometimes end up being inordinately proud of some crappy thing that you made that you know is really not that great. But really just taking joy in the process. And I remember thinking specifically like, wow, it is so cool that my hands can do this and my mind can do this. And I'm hoping you guys can relate to that feeling of just marveling at what is truly a miracle, craftsmanship, our ability to make something. So for me, when I was in this beginner mind state, I was also really privileged to be a part of an awesome jazz community, a learning community here in Indianapolis. I was involved with, I was getting lessons one-on-one with musicians who were taking the time to treat me as an individual and pass down their knowledge to me. And there were a lot of informal playing opportunities where people who were way better than you would let you play with them, which is pretty cool. And they would give you a chance to learn from actually experiencing playing the music. And particularly when you're doing something like improvising, which requires you to virtually jump off a cliff, it's really nice to have a support system there. If I could use one word to describe what that learning experience was like, I would say that it was organic. It was totally organic and natural. It was people who love jazz wanting to tell me about jazz and share that love with me on a one-to-one basis. And so I started to develop this voice, and I began to learn how to speak, and I had people to speak to, a real community, which was awesome. Okay, but eventually I came into contact with some dehumanizing forces, which, by the way, I think is probably inevitable in our society. And for me, the dehumanizing force that I came into contact with was industrialized schooling, i.e. music school. I do not want you guys to interpret this as a diatribe specifically against music schools or universities. I'm just telling you that this was sort of my experience. And definitely there were some people within the school who were trying not to be a part of this, but bureaucracies kind of have a way of turning us into numbers, don't you agree? So anyway, I went to college, and the learning environment there was totally different from what I have been used to. Hierarchy and authority were of the utmost importance. Professors were up here, students were down here. There really wasn't much meaning at a level playing field. And the teaching process was pretty mechanized. In fact, I remember an address to the incoming freshman class at this not-to-be-named music school, where we were told that we were literally products on an assembly line, and that when we graduated, we would be stamped with the brand of that school. What a thing to say to somebody who wants to develop their own personal musical voice. And they told us that we should be proud. And at that moment I thought, you know, I don't know if I want to be a product on an assembly line. I kind of think I don't. I'd rather just be Sophie. And of course, there's an extremely strong emphasis on technique. and little to no emphasis on sort of the other subtleties and intangibles of music, you know, trying to develop a voice and trying to develop your own personality and identity. And I don't blame them. I understand why the emphasis is on technique, because that's easy to teach to lots of people at the same time. It's easy to mechanize, and it's easy to break down into rubrics and syllabi. Unfortunately, it's a little bit misleading for people, because sometimes they come away thinking technique is all you need, and there's so much more to it than technique, as I'm sure you guys all know. Okay, so I'm getting this stuff in my music classes, and then also I'm at a liberal arts school, and so the philosophy that I'm being taught is something that I'm going to call existentialism, although if there are any philosophy majors out there, I'm sure they would like to write a book to tell me why what I'm describing isn't existentialism. But anyway, we'll just get to the point here. Seriously, last night I looked it up online. I was like, okay, let me just make sure that I know what existentialism means. And the first sentence I read was, there has been no agreement about the definition of existentialism. So I think I'm good here, but if any philosophers want to correct me, that's fine. Okay, so according to the brand of existentialism that was delivered to me in college, we are basically just a collection of chemicals. We are bodies. There is nothing spiritual or exalted to us, and you would be a fool to believe in God. Meaninglessness and pointlessness characterize our existence here on Earth, and probably the best thing to do would be to just submit to the meaninglessness and surrender your humanity to a certain extent, but maybe engage in some hedonism as sort of like, you know, some kind of a side prize or something. Okay, so seriously. So in other words, become obsessed with the technical, forget the human. And it should come as no surprise to y'all that going through that experience caused me to become very burnt out, which is what happens to a lot of people who come in contact with the dehumanizing force. So what I realize now, thinking back on it, is that this existentialism, as I described it, is literally the doctrine of burnout. What is this philosophy describing? That feeling of being drained and dissatisfied, having become commodified. Whatever it is that your craft may be, for me music, whatever it is for you, when you feel this drain and this burnout, you feel like it's lost its meaning. And that beginner mind, that passionate joy that you had way back when, it's kind of disappeared, and you don't know where it went, and you don't know how to get it back. And there's a symbol for this that is extremely popular in our culture right now, and that is the zombie. To me, a zombie is I'm not kidding. I heard somebody laugh. I don't think zombies are for fun. I really don't like zombies, and here's the reason. A zombie is, yes, she knows. A zombie is a body with no soul. It literally lives the doctrine of meaninglessness. And that is what is so terrifying about it. Well, really, what's terrifying is that we can relate to that. We can feel that in our own lives. That is scary. So for me, at this point, first of all, I had to admit that I was burned out, which is an extremely shameful thing to do when you're an artist, to say, like, you know what? It's true. I'm burned out. At least I was ashamed. Maybe that's immature, I don't know. But so I decided to take a step back and just stop playing music. That's literally what I did. I stopped playing music. And I decided that I was going to stop until I could figure this out and reclaim that meaning, because it was so important to me. And my first attempt at this, I think I sort of misidentified the problem. I thought that it was my fault. I thought that the fault was entirely mine and that I had been too focused on music. I spent way too many hours alone in the practice room. I hadn't spent enough time developing, you know, myself as a human being, and so what I needed to do was just, you know, go experience other stuff and develop my personality, and then probably everything would come back and I would be able to have that beginner mindset again. I figured that the problems that I was seeing and experiencing were limited to the world of music, and that once I went out into the wider world and met other people and kind of got outside my box, I would find out that everybody else was doing great things and continuing to be energized and excited about their lives and feeling lots of meaning and purpose, and yeah, it was going to be great. So I changed my major. I studied abroad. I learned a foreign language, which I kind of forgot later. I graduated, and I got a 9-to-5 job, and I got a savings account, and I even had health insurance for a while, and I had friends who didn't know the first thing about music, etc., etc. But guess what? The problem did not go away. And in fact, what I learned was this problem was so much bigger than me, and it was so much bigger than just the world of music. It was literally a global problem. I do not think that it is just chance or random that the 9-to-5 job I ended up getting was in the field of mental health. I think it was meant to be, because that was where I got to learn about all different kinds of mental distress and human distress and anxiety and emotion. And what I discovered, speaking on the simplest terms, is that I think virtually all mental distress is caused by dehumanization. It is caused by denying the humanity and the meaning of the person who is no longer being treated as a person. And I think that many human beings made the exact same mistake that I did. They misidentify the problem. They think, oh, it's in me. It's my problem. It's my heredity. It's my chemicals. It's just me being messed up. But it's not, okay? What I've learned is that it's bigger than just each and every one of us on our own. It's a societal issue. What I also saw is that what brings healing to people in mental distress is finding your humanity again and acknowledging it in yourself, and then acknowledging it in other people too, and taking the time to say, I see that each and every one of you is a human being, and I'm going to treat you all as human beings, and none of you shall be treated as numbers or objects. So taking this lesson back to my own life, I realized that music wasn't my problem. Music was the solution. This was the key to my soul, and this was how I was going to unlock my soul power. So, what is soul power? It is your voice, your philosophy, your intention, your humanity, your soul. When you create art, you speak of this. You reveal it. You put it on display for people. Anybody can walk up and see it. And moreover, you're literally giving it away, which means that you have to be really strong. You have to be secure in where you're standing and what it is that you're doing. And I think really what is key is that it has to be freely and knowingly given. So our culture says the only meaning you can have is the meaning you can buy. But what you say is that the meaning was inside me all along. I am human, and I choose to give this to my fellow humans. You bring an amazing amount of healing to yourself and others. Here's what I believe. Whatever it is that you make, whatever it is that you do with your hands and your minds, make it well. Make it to last. Make it to serve humanity. So for me, in my personal revolution, here we go to the conclusion of the story. I returned to playing music, and it felt so good. It was like being back at the beginning and knowing it for the very first time. You know, having taken that break, I was so much more grateful for every opportunity to play music with other people. And there were so many things that used to bother me before that I just couldn't care less about. Really, what it was about was the joy of being able to create this and to share it with other people. And so this time, it's become a lot more epic. It's not really about career or about like my personal advancement. I'm going to get a little melodramatic now, guys, but forgive me. I don't get to give speeches very often. I really think that this is literally a battle of good and evil. And I think that we pit our humanity and our craftsmanship against this giant machine that could recreate a counterfeit 1,000 times faster and maybe 1,000 times cheaper too. But it's just not the same thing. So I think that our mission needs to be really broad here when we recognize what we're up against. We need to respect humanity always, that of ourselves and that of our fellow human beings. I think that our goal should be to avoid participating in dehumanization at all costs. This requires constant vigilance because it comes in myriad forms. I could get into the nitty-gritty details with you guys of what I view as dehumanization, but I think it would be way more fun if you all got to think about it on your own and see if you can find real-life examples in your own existence, which I bet you can. So as I considered this idea of fighting dehumanization and playing my music to do that, I rediscovered this whole idea of craftsmanship. And I wanted to broaden the definition to say that craftsmanship is really an affirmation of my humanity through mindful creation. And when I do that, I realize it can't be limited to just music. It can't be limited to just this one thing that I do. It has to be in all that I do. When I make a breakfast, when I have a conversation, when I pick a bouquet of flowers, all of that can be done with craftsmanship, and all of it can be part of this super melodramatic battle of good and evil thing that I was talking about. And this is not unique to people who are artists or people who have achieved, some kind of high level of artistic sophistication. Literally all human beings can practice this. It is really a huge part of what makes us human. And this practice, I call it revolutionary craftsmanship. And I think that it would be awesome if we could all begin to practice this. Make it your way of life to choose the real act of human creation over the industrialized counterfeit every time. I think that we have to lead by example. I think we have to practice what we preach. I think we have to practice revolutionary craftsmanship so consistently that it's not even necessary to preach or talk about it. And I know this is probably different than the revolution you were picturing. Maybe you were thinking of a social outing with your friends and another large crowd of people, and you guys could hold signs and chant, and then you could go home, and it would be done. But I don't think that's how it works. To do this, it's a lot lonelier and harder, and it takes a lot longer. It's a daily practice, privately and publicly maintained, and it never ends. From this day forward, as long as you live, let us practice revolutionary craftsmanship. Let us embrace the fact that we are human beings with soul power. Let us shout that our work has meaning, and let us be very intentional about the meaning behind our work. This is not about ego, it's about love, it's about giving, it's about renewal and restoration. We have to lead by example, and we have to live this every day. By practicing revolutionary craftsmanship, we reclaim our humanity. We literally save the world. Thank you.
Awesome. That was so good. All right, that was great. Awesome. So does anybody have any questions for Sophie? Thank you so much. That was a great talk.
Thanks.
Any questions? Okay, I have one. I'll start. Can you tell us a little bit about your saxophone?
About the saxophone?
Yeah.
Okay, like mine specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, mine is a Selmer Mark VI saxophone, which for those of you who aren't obsessed with saxophones is kind of like the best saxophone you can get. And mine was made in 1957, and it's a beautiful instrument. And actually, I found it when I was a junior in high school, right down the street at Musicians Repair on Capitol. And it's kind of a cool story because these things are really, really hard to come by. And also, I wasn't rich. But it just sort of crossed my path at the perfect moment. And so my secret name for my saxophone is Kismet, because that means meant to be. Yeah, it's hard to pick one. But I've always really liked Hank Mobley. Great record of his is Soul Station. I really like John Coltrane a lot. And also Joe Henderson is one of my favorites. Okay, well, I'm glad you asked, because I didn't want to get all preachy in my speech, but I can tell you a few things that I believe. Personally, I am against taking grant money for my art. I will never do that, because I think that it's really important to, I guess, just have like a strong center and a source for where your music is coming from, and to make sure that it is coming from you. So when somebody gives you grant money, they obviously have an agenda. And it might be a positive agenda or a negative agenda. I don't know. I don't have time to figure out what their agenda is, but I know what my agenda is. So that's one big thing that I think about from time to time with music. But a really big thing for me is I do not take gigs that I don't want to play. And I'm sure all of you guys who do art as a profession know how often you get presented with these opportunities where, well, it's a lot of money, but you have to dress entirely in saran wrap, and you have to like stand by the fog machine, and you're like, I just don't want to do that. I really don't. And I don't care if you have $10,000. I'm not doing it. So for me, my personal rules are, I don't take any gigs that I don't want to play, which means I intend to have fun on every gig that I play. I don't play with people that I don't like to play with. And this is sounding like a toddler or something, but seriously, I think this is what you have to do to protect your spirit and your mindset there. And so what does that mean for me financially? It means that I need a day job, and I am totally cool with that. I don't think that that makes me less of a musician. I think it makes me more of a musician because now I am totally free to take only the gigs that I want. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and to be honest, what you envisioned for me was far more positive than the reality. Usually when I meet young people, they are already in burnout phase, and the reason why is because they're involved with like 10 different extracurricular activities at the minimum, and they never, this is the real tragedy, they go straight to burnout. They never even get to have that beginner mind that comes from being devoted to a craft and being really excited about learning it, because they're already, their mind is so split between all these different things, and you know, their parents and teachers with fully good intentions are telling them like, hey, this is going to build your resume and you're going to get a scholarship for this, and what they don't realize is that their kid never had the time to fall in love with any one thing. So I get kids who literally, I ask them, like, what are you, so, you know, did you practice this week? Well, no, of course not. Okay, so what did you do instead? What are you interested in? What are your passions? And they don't really have anything to say. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just saxophone for some reason. People, when they start saxophone, usually they're a little older than like piano or guitar or something, so maybe it's just the fault of my instrument. But I talked to a lot of other musicians, and they're all seeing the exact same thing, and we're pretty scared about it. We just don't meet very many young people who fall in love with music anymore. I'm sure they're still out there, but yeah, I don't meet them. So, but what would I say to somebody? I mean, hypothetically, I would say what I just said to you guys. I would say, this is what happened to me. Here's how it worked for me. You know, you can't even tell somebody, like, well, this will work for you, or I bet your story's going to be just like mine. But I think that people, I know when I was in the midst of my burnout, and I mean, I was hurting. It is not easy to stop doing the thing that you love. But I took courage and hope from hearing other people's stories, and I was seeking those out. I was asking people that I knew and respected as musicians, like, what did you do when you felt burnt out? And, you know, the stuff that they did, maybe I tried it, maybe I didn't, but I think the most important part was I knew that this wasn't going to last forever, and there is a way out, but you all have to find your own way out. Well, actually, it wasn't exactly a piece of music, but I really, really felt like I had made it home and to someplace special when our group started playing at the Chatterbox, which was about, I guess, like 2 or 3 years ago. And it was just a really special group of people, Nick included. And the music that we were making, I just felt like it was so, I want to use the word primal, not in the sense of like jungle-like, but like it just took me back to what I really loved about music. We were taking chances, we were friends, you know, we were having a conversation up there with music. And so that group, which I'm still a part of, although it has evolved, and that's what's featured on our new album, I mean, that's really what I feel like shows we're back, or I'm back. I don't know. I guess, to be honest, I think that even if I hadn't gone to school for music, even if I had started out with a different major, which is what I ended up with, I think that I still would have had to deal with these issues of being dehumanized and commodified constantly. And I personally hate to make a big deal out of the fact that I'm a woman who plays an instrument. However, I think that women can really relate to this, of just being turned into a body or an object, and people are constantly expecting me to sell my music in that way, to use my body. And that's what most, well, I shouldn't say most, but that's what a lot of musicians like me do. They wear really short skirts, and that's not necessarily their personality, but people tell them, hey, you could sell more records this way, and they say, okay. But for me, I say, absolutely not. I would rather not sell the records. But anyway, to answer your question, I kind of think that it's inevitable. I think, could be wrong, but I think that a huge part of growing up is seeing this dehumanizing force and then coming to terms with it, either by agreeing to join or deciding to defend your humanity at all costs. And so I think that each and every one of us is going to have to live the struggle in one way or another.
Okay, I have one more question. How do you balance your day job versus your, your instrument, your music? How do you balance that and make sure one doesn't take over the other and make sure that they work together?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, and you have to make boundaries for sure. So I'm part-time at my day job, which is really important. I did try to do full-time, and it just, for me, can't work. So I'm part-time, and on the days that I'm not working, I kind of try to maintain a similar schedule, even though I'm not at work. So like I still sort of get up at the same time, and I still sort of try to be productive in the same ways throughout the day, just not at work, at home, doing my own stuff. And I take my music making and the other elements of craftsmanship in my life, which there are a few others, very seriously. I take them as serious as I would take, you know, any other professional engagement. So just because I'm at home and just because I'm my own boss, and just because a lot of the things I'm doing aren't paid, it's not for a client, it's for me because I wanted to make it, I still take it at that level of seriousness. It's not like, oh, you know, I'll pop on Netflix and eat some food, and then maybe I might get around to doing something today. You know, I try to make each weekday really productive, and that's what personally works for me. I think that everybody has the potential to find that balance, and it might be different for other people, but for me, that's what works.